Kim faced 7 murder charges. He nearly walked free, but a key informant emerged in one case, resulting in a minimal 15-year sentence. The families of the victims were filled with anger and despair, and a young girl named Heejoo witnessed their pain. 3 months prior, her father, a CC detective sergeant, had come home early to make breakfast for her. As he stepped out of a taxi, a man collided with him, causing blood to pour from his neck. He attempted to reach Heejoo, dragging his cassette player behind him. As she slept, she turned her face toward him, and he took his last breath while gazing at her. The next morning, his fellow detectives arrived at his home, concerned about his absence. They discussed the sergeant's wife, who had left due to gambling debts, forcing the family to move into a basement apartment. When Dae-young picked up a cake, Ben inquired about the occasion, and Dae-young replied it was the sergeant's birthday. Upon opening the door, he noticed some blood on the stairs. Loading his gun, he quietly entered the house, where he found Heejoo embracing the sergeant and gently caressing his cheek. Now she sits in front of the police station, listening to her father's cassette player. Da-young walks up to her and asks if she's waiting for someone. 15 years later, when Kim is released, Da-young smashes Tofu against his head, insisting that he still needs to answer for the 6 murders he claims he didn't commit. Da-young isn't convinced and shoves his still-lit cigarette into his pocket. While watching a classic concert on TV, Heejoo feels inspired and writes down Nietzsche's well-known quote about music being essential to life. She pins the note to a wall already covered with her thoughts. On the rooftop, she observes her mother through the window. When her husband shows up, she unexpectedly steps in front of him, catching him off guard. She tells him that because of his mistreatment of women, his time is running out. Inside the police station, she tidies up the corridor. Meanwhile, Dae-young collects $10 from each person in the office, which constitutes her salary. In another part of the station, Kim is using an app to search for Minsu by checking phone numbers and calling them one by one. Detective Yoon places a strawberry milk on her desk and drapes her jacket over her shoulders. Now a sergeant, Dae-young instructs him to monitor Kim alongside Cha. Since Cha is a new detective and unfamiliar with Kim, Yoon takes a moment to explain, cautioning him about Kim's dangerous nature. He recounts how Kim murdered his girlfriend, breaking her arms and suffocating her with a plastic bag. He has a peculiar habit of putting dog leashes on his victims and even dismembering their bodies. In a rundown hotel room, Kim hurriedly approaches a sex worker, haunted by memories of murdering his girlfriend. He recalls how he twisted her arms behind her back and covered her head with the plastic bag, just as Yoon had instructed. When he returns, the sex worker is furious, calling him a pervert, while the pimp steps away to relieve himself, with Heejoo observing from afar. Another person approaches the pimp and also urinates, which prompts the pimp to confront him, igniting his anger. The pimp threatens to kill him, but the other man dismisses the threat and swiftly slashes his throat. As the pimp bleeds out, the attacker cleans his knife with his pee before getting into the pimp's car to deal with the sex worker as well, all while Heejoo watches in shock. Back at home, she lies on the floor surrounded by newspaper clippings detailing various murder cases. She is curious about who is taking over her responsibilities, which complicates matters further. The following day, both the pimp and the prostitute are discovered dead in a car, and Dae-young learns that Kim has never left the hotel. When Dae-young confronts Kim about the murders, Kim claims he is just as puzzled about who did it and warns Dae-young not to rush and overlook the true killer again. As Dae-young heads back, he accidentally collides with Heejoo, causing her to fall. Although irritated, he offers her his hand, glances at her name tag, and walks away. Dae-young instructs Yoon to uncover the identity of the informant who tipped off Kim 15 years prior. Meanwhile, Heejoo is in the bathroom pouring bleach into the sink and scrubbing her hands obsessively. That night on the rooftop, she observes her mother returning home, only to witness her being assaulted by her husband. When he steps outside, Heejoo intervenes, telling him to leave. He retorts for her to go away, but she responds by striking him on the head with a rock. She repeatedly strikes him on the head, insisting that assault and theft are punishable by death in Saudi Arabia, and that the law must be just and impartial for all citizens. The following morning, Kim snaps a photo of the detectives and heads out for a jog, quickly noticing a crowd gathering around a body, killed in a manner he's familiar with. Dae-young is frustrated that a warrant hasn't been issued, especially since this is the third murder since his release, and the pattern mirrors Kim's case, but Ben argues that they lack sufficient evidence. Meanwhile, in a butcher shop, Min-soo, who murdered the pimp and prostitute, claims he has no choice but to confront him. He uses a needle to unlock Kim's room and enters, only to find Kim missing. Min-soo turns on the bathroom light and reaches for the doorknob, but Kim stabs his hand from inside and attempts to strike at his head. At that moment, Dae-young calls Kim outside and enters through the open door. When Kim notices Min-soo behind him and mentions he has a guest, Dae-young quickly turns and aims his gun, but Min-soo has already vanished. Meanwhile, Heejoo feels a wave of anxiety as she gazes at the dark windows of her mother's house. She rings the doorbell, but there's no response. When she tries the door, she discovers it's unlocked. Stepping inside, she is devastated to find her mother has taken her own life, clutching a picture of Heejoo. She feels abandoned once more as her mother has left without a word. Back at home, she begins to cut out the photos of the victims, sorting them into categories of stabbing and cutting, realizing there are two distinct methods. As Dae-young checks Kim's call history, he sees that all the recipients are named Min-soo, but the informant is also Min-soo, who came from the same orphanage as Kim. This revelation suggests that Kim has killed his lover, and his friend Min-soo led to his capture, leaving Kim desperate to find Min-soo. Heejoo, carrying a picture of Min-soo, decides to buy the largest dog leash available in the store. Meanwhile, Dae-young is convinced that Kim poses a threat to Min-soo, so he instructs the detectives to keep a close watch on both Min-soo and Kim to ensure Min-soo's safety. Kim makes a call to another Min-soo, and this time the voice sounds familiar to him. Upon returning home, he notices a paper stuck to the door that mentions Min-soo, triggering memories of a time they spent together, which involved some unfortunate incidents with dogs. A truck filled with countless empty bottles pulls up in front of a house, and Heejoo steps out, directing the crew to unload the bottles in the front yard. When Min-soo arrives home, he discovers that the lights are out, so he enters cautiously, only to find the floor covered in shattered glass. As he navigates through the mess, Heejoo carelessly tosses an electrical cable onto the glass, causing Min-soo to faint from an electric shock. She notices the calluses on his thumb, a sign that he enjoys cutting and remembers being his assistant. She tells him he should consider himself fortunate to be used as bait. As Kim lies in bed trying to sleep, he senses something unusual. When he pulls back the blanket, he discovers a wrapped body on a dog leash. It's the lifeless Min-soo. Suddenly, Heejoo rushes in and stabs him in the third rib, rendering him immobile. When he asks her identity, she reveals that she has been thinking only of him for a long time, tightening the dog leash around his neck until he loses consciousness. The police burst in, and Dae-young notices the blood is still fresh, instructing the detectives to search the building. Meanwhile, Cha finds a couple severely injured in the adjacent room, and they are quickly taken away in an ambulance. Sitting on the bed, Dae-young sees blood pooling on the floor and discovers a dead man hidden beneath the bed. In the ambulance, a rescue worker tries to keep her alert, but Kim suddenly strikes his head with a fire extinguisher, and using medical scissors, he stabs the woman. Heejoo purchases a ticket for the London Symphony Orchestra, mentioning that by the day of the performance, she will have been caught up in the excitement. Thrilled, she pulls out a lovely dress, some new underwear, and cosmetics that she has never used before. Meanwhile, a detective reports that Kim appears to have no connection to Min-soo's death based on his injuries and the profiling and crime scene analysis. As Kim scrolls through the photos taken by the detectives, he decides to call the newspaper. Heejoo completes a knitted scarf and places it in a box surrounded by many more boxes. While waiting at the post office, she notices a newspaper headline stating that Kim is claiming his innocence, which means her plan has fallen through and he can be released. The chief becomes enraged, questioning how Kim can still be a suspect when he has the detective's photos from the time of the murders and no solid evidence against him. He instructs Ben to wrap up the case by the end of the week. Heejoo gives Dae-young some bread since he hasn't eaten all day. She tells him that the only way for evil to win is when good people do nothing, encouraging him to be brave for justice like she is. Meanwhile, In the internet cafe, Kim is smoking despite the clerk's request for him to stop. Upon returning, he recalls seeing a face on the wanted list. Curious, Kim searches online about the victim who fits his pattern and discovers that the victim's wife was the sergeant's spouse 15 years ago, and they have a daughter. After some time, Da-young enters the cafe, gathers everyone in front of the wall, and spots Kim hiding in a corner. They engage in a struggle, with Da-young attempting to subdue him, but Kim grabs a pair of scissors from the floor. He runs away from Da-young, quickly attacking Cha before speeding away. The police are now on high alert, searching for Kim, who casually walks into the police station. Heejoo gathers her belongings from her desk and, after a moment of uncertainty, decides to leave. As she heads out, she notices Kim inside the office, aware that he's searching for her. He approaches an officer, pretending to be Cha, and inquires about the address of a sergeant who died 15 years ago. The officer mentions that it must be Heejoo's father, prompting Kim to recall her name tag. Later, Heejoo stops by a pet shop to buy a new dog leash. Once home, she neatly stows away her dress and cosmetics in the closet. She struggles to grasp Nietzsche's warning about becoming a monster while battling monsters. Now convinced of the idea that God is dead, she feels a monster is necessary. As Kim descends the stairs to her home, she pulls out a pair of scissors. When the sensor light activates, she quickly lunges and stabs him, only to be stabbed in return. After headbutting him, she makes a break for it. Meanwhile, the police are alerted and head to her location. She flees into the mountains with him in pursuit. In a frantic moment, she calls Da-young, prompting the police to turn back. He catches up to her in a puddle, shoving her into the water, but she retaliates by grabbing a stone and striking him on the head. She steps into the playground and begins to swing while standing. With the dog leash draped around her neck, she declares that it's time for both of them to face punishment, leaping into the air. Kim watches her in disbelief as the police hurry over. Da-young cradles her in his arms, tears streaming down his face. Kim is sentenced to death for 7 counts of murder, right in front of the police, who are wearing mufflers crafted by Heejoo. Da-young sobs as he gazes at the floor of Heejoo's home, recalling her words that the only way for evil to win is when good people do nothing. And this is how the story concludes. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more content like this. Thank you for watching.